Hello, this is Angela with Park Rose Permaculture. I have tried and failed so many times this morning to make a video, car alarms and mowing and just a lot of noise out in the neighborhood today, but I have a quiet moment now, so we're going to see if we can get through this video. I wanted to talk to you all today about my very, very favorite variety of winter squash and also what the natural progression is for growing winter squash. I see folks post a number of questions or ask me directly a number of questions about growing winter squash. So I thought that I would answer some of those questions right now because it's highly relevant here in September. So first off, I'm in my front yard. I have winter squash everywhere. I just tuck it in everywhere and let it vine and do its thing. I'm up here. This is my driveway. You can see we just got a giant pile of mulch from Chip Drop. I'm working on spreading it. And right here I have a hugel bed that I put in when we took out half our driveway. So I have this hugel culture bed. This is a bed that is pretty new, and the soil fertility is not that great yet because it's just a bunch of wood and then some compost and other amendments in it as well, but it's still just like a fresh bed, so it's not at peak potential. So it has baby perennials in it. So when I have a situation like that where I have open ground, I'm going to throw down winter squash seeds and see what happens. So what I'm growing here is one plant of Burgess Buttercup, which is, in my opinion, the best variety of winter squash. And I have grown dozens of varieties over the years. There is a great book by Amy Goldman called The Complete Squash. And it's a beautifully illustrated book with wonderful descriptions. And maybe 15 years ago, I started picking out and hunting down the varieties she said were the tastiest. Because I sometimes grow winter squash for looks, for ornamentation, for display on the harvest table. But mostly I want food, right? So I've tried many varieties, and I've come down to two big favorites. This is the top. My other one is Oregon Sweetmeat. I just think these are fantastic, keeper squash, delicious flavor. So why Burgess Buttercup besides the flavor? The texture of the flesh is great for baking, putting in stews, roasting, very versatile. It's not mealy, it's not stringy, it's not watery. Good dry fleshed squash. And you can see the size. So we're talking squash that are between 4 and 7 pounds usually, although sometimes, there can be smaller ones on there. But this is a great squash for one family dinner or, a couple or an individual person to make 2 or 3 meals out of. So it's a really nice squash. You're not looking at a giant squash that you don't know how to process and don't know what to do with it. And you need a big, like a chisel and or a meat cleaver or something to get into it. This is a very usable squash, and I just haven't found anything with a better flavor. So, okay, so now you know Burgess Buttercup. This is a must-have squash in your garden. So how do you know when it's ready? This is a question I see frequently. So right now my squash is not ready. And this one squash plant has 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks like, I'm looking around here on this front bed, it looks like 6 squash on this that are going to mature in time off this one plant. And none of them are ready yet. So the stem is still real green. The abscission layer here, where it connects to the plant, all of this is green and healthy and thriving. This squash is not ready to be picked. We're starting to get closer now. I have talked in the past about nature fluency and reading the language of your plants and reading what your plants are communicating to you and how that can make you a more successful gardener and can help you have a more connected relationship with your garden, and that plants are talking to us about their needs, about their life cycles. So at this point in the garden season, most of the winter squash are still saying, look, we're still thriving and we're doing really well and we're still growing and we're still putting energy into our pumpkins, our winter squash. Please don't pick us yet. But they're starting to give hints that they're getting tired. And the biggest early hint is this, which is powdery mildew. And I see a lot of folks asking this time of year, what do I do to combat powdery mildew? And usually the organic answer is to spray it with milk, and that does work, or to spray it with some diluted ivory dish soap. If I get powdery mildew early in the season, it's because I'm overhead watering or we have a very rainy early summer, and that contributes to powdery mildew. If you don't overhead water, it's really not a problem on pumpkins until you hit September. And that is because the plant is nearing the end of its life cycle. Just like I spoke earlier in a video about growing comfrey, when you grow comfrey, after the plant has finished blooming and the foliage is tired, it tends to get powdery mildew. And that is the plant communicating, this growth cycle is over. Please cut me back and I'll send up a flush of new growth. The same way right now, my winter squash is telling me we're tired. We're tired, we're not putting in the energy into combating this fungal growth at the ends of our leaves. We're not really fighting it. You might even get some leaves that totally die back like this. I wouldn't bother doing anything with that. The plant is telling you, hey, we're winding down. We're winding down. We're just old and tired, and soon you're going to have a harvest of delicious winter squash. So I take that as a communication from my plants that now is the time to just let them do their thing and run out the course of their life cycle. And soon, when the vines all die back and get brown and it's no longer green here, then I will know it is time to harvest my winter squash. And when you harvest your winter squash, never, never, never pull it. You don't want to damage this stem here. You want to cut it with a knife. And that's because when you damage this stem here, it can create an open wound. And that's how bacteria and fungus can get in and your winter squash won't keep. So if you want this big, nice, hard rind to keep your fruit inside, the flesh inside safe, you need to make sure there's no entry points for bacteria or fungus. So the way to prevent introducing an entry point here at the stem is to cut it here and make sure you don't carry a winter squash by the stem because the stem is brittle and can snap. Carry it by the bottom and cut it with a knife and protect that stem so you don't end up with an open wound. I keep my squash under my breakfast nook table or under my bed. They like to be stored about room temperature out of the light, and they'll keep for months and months. Burgess Buttercup is a great keeper squash. So I hope you enjoyed those tips on growing winter squash, reading the communication that they are putting out to you, and hope you give Burgess Buttercup a try next year in your garden. If you haven't grown it before, I'm telling you, just the best. It makes such delicious soup, such delicious pumpkin bread, bundt cake, pound cake, really good in a pie, really good roasted and served with cumin and chili powder and smoked salt. Just a fantastic all-around great family-sized squash. All right, I'll be back soon with more from my garden.